You have been walking toward a place without knowing you were going there, not planning the turn, not choosing the corner, not designing the hour when everything would shift beneath you. Right now, while you listen, I want to show you what that walk actually was. There are moments you can still remember. You followed a pull you did not understand. You took a route you had not mapped. You arrived somewhere that made no sense at the time, and everything afterward pivoted on the arrival. You came to a well when you did not think wells were where you looked anymore. You had learned quicker sources, easier sources, sources that asked less of you. And yet there you stood, at an edge of town you would never choose in an ordinary week. In exactly the place where the one you needed was already sitting. And notice who was waiting for whom. You did not find me the way a person finds lost keys. I was at the well before your errand was, sitting where your route was always going to pass. That is the detail that undoes the story you tell about yourself, the one where you are always the pursuer, always the one reaching, always the one who wants more closeness than anyone wants back. There is a tiredness that comes from believing you have chased every good thing you ever had. You have carried that tiredness for years. Set it down for a moment and consider the other possibility. Some of the encounters that changed you were not caught by you. They were kept for you. Appointments you never made, held by someone who knew your schedule better than you did. You have told yourself it was accident, coincidence, the kind of random meeting that means nothing and proves nothing about whether you matter. You have explained it away 1,000 times in the privacy of your own mind. The timing felt wrong. The hour felt impossible. A person as careful as you does not simply end up somewhere unplanned, does not arrive without strategy, does not stumble into a sacred encounter by chance. And yet you are here. The arrival is real, and it was never random. Every place you have arrived at was a place I had already reached first. The woman in the story you need was also taking what she called the wrong turn. She was walking out to the well at an hour when respectable women had already drawn their water and gone home. Midday, when the sun was highest and the road was loneliest. She went at noon instead of morning because the other women would not walk beside her. She had made a small, private decision somewhere along the way. Better to belong to no one than to be openly despised by everyone she passed. So she timed her thirst around other people's contempt. You know something about that kind of scheduling. You have done your own version of it. The grocery run at the hour when nobody from the old life shops. The service you slip into after the singing starts, and out of before the greeting time. The gathering you skip, not because you were not invited, but because someone who knew the earlier chapters of you might be there. The message you answered 2 days late, on purpose, so the conversation cannot gather enough momentum to go anywhere real. You have a whole quiet choreography built around not being seen by the people most likely to actually see you. You call it being private. You call it protecting your peace. Look at it honestly, just once, and you will recognize it for what it is. A noon walk to a well. Armor, worn so long it has started to feel like skin. And think about what noon means in that country. The 1 hour nobody chooses. The sun straight overhead. No shade on the road. The hour proves the avoidance. Nobody carries a heavy jar through the worst heat of the day unless the heat is easier to face than the people. So mark this. The meeting did not happen despite her worst hour. It happened inside it. Not at the respectable morning well time, surrounded by community. At the exposed, sweating, nobody should be out now hour that her shame had chosen for her. You keep assuming I schedule my visits for your composed seasons, for after the mess is managed. The record says otherwise. The record says I sit down on purpose in the exact hour you picked because you thought no one would be there. The well itself was ancient, dug centuries before she was born by determined hands, in ground that had no obligation to yield water at all. That is the kind of well that gets dug not because a place deserves it, but because a person decides, I will find water here. This is where I will drink. And it was deep, famously deep. The kind of depth you cannot reach by wanting to. You need a rope, a jar, a bucket, equipment, effort, a plan. Remember that detail. It is going to matter in a moment. When she arrived that day, a stranger was sitting on the well. A traveler, resting in a region his people usually walked around rather than through. And what happened next was not on her itinerary. He asked her for a drink, a simple request. He did not announce himself. He did not open with what he had come to offer. He asked her for something first. Hold on to that, because it is how I often find you, not at the moment you were ready to receive. At the moment you were busy with something else entirely. Busy with the errand. Busy with the routine you could do half asleep. The encounters that change everything rarely knock first. They interrupt. She pushed back. A Jewish man did not ask a Samaritan woman for anything. Not by law exactly. By something older than law. A rule written into both their bones by generations of people who preferred not to see each other. But he had asked her directly. Addressed her as though her answer mattered. As though what she did or did not do was significant enough to be questioned. So she answered, "Why would you ask me for this?" She did not say yes. She did not say no. She named plainly the thing that made no sense about the moment. And in the naming, something had already shifted between them. Something that could not be shifted back. He told her that if she knew who was asking, she would have asked him instead, and he would have given her living water. And here is the part of her answer that gets skipped, the part I want you to hear slowly. She looked at this stranger, sitting on a well she knew to be deep, and she raised the obvious, practical, unanswerable objection. "Sir, you have nothing to draw with and the well is deep. Where would you even get this water?" She was not being rude. She was being right. He had no rope, no jar, no bucket. By every rule of wells she had ever learned, the man was making an offer he had no equipment to keep. You have raised the same objection. Maybe not at a well, at a hospital bed, at a bank balance, at the ruins of a relationship you could not repair with any tool you owned. You looked at what was being promised to you and you measured it against the visible equipment, and the equipment was not there. So you filed the promise under wishful thinking, but her objection only made sense for the kind of water that lives at the bottom of a shaft. He was not offering her that kind. The source he carried did not need a rope, because it did not run through the machinery her thirst had always depended on. That is the whole difference between what you keep drawing and what I keep offering. One requires your equipment. The other requires only your yes. And you know the daily version of her well, even if you have never called it that. It is wherever you go first when the thirst wakes up. The screen you reach for before your eyes are fully open. The person whose approval you check the way she checked the water level. The small ritual that takes the edge off the ache for an hour. Then the hour ends, and you are walking the same road again. Nobody stands at that kind of well on purpose because they love the walk. They stand there because the walk is familiar, and the disappointment is familiar, and familiar disappointment feels safer than unfamiliar hope. I am not shaming the bucket. I am only asking you to notice how many years of your life have gone into round trips. Then came the sentence a forbidden region had been crossed to say, "But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst, but the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water, springing up into everlasting life." John 4:13-14. There was no transaction in it. Not "I give this, if you do that." The offer just sat there between them. Hers to take or to leave. Everyone who drinks from this well will be thirsty again. That was the first half. On the surface, water. Underneath, both of them knew, more than water. A thirst no bucket in town could reach. A woman who had arranged her whole life around not being wanted. And an offer with no conditions stapled to it. She asked him for it. And what is astonishing is not that she asked. It is when she asked. Before she had finished wrestling with what he meant, still confused, still unconvinced, still caught between the old rule that said, "Do not trust this," and the new thing rising in her that said something here is true. She did not wait for clarity. She did not wait for the fear to lift. She said, "Give me this water." She meant it before she understood it. Some truths reach you first as a thirst, and only later as a thought you can put into words. Then he told her to go call her husband. A strange turn, and they both knew why. 5 husbands. And the man she lived with now was not one. He was not cornering her the way a judge corners. He was not naming it to shame her. He was showing her something. You have been known this entire conversation, known in your history, known in the exact places you assumed disqualified you. And the conversation did not end when the knowing surfaced. He was saying, without saying it, "I have seen the whole of your story, and I am still sitting here. There is no threshold you must pass first. You are not left outside until you arrange yourself into something respectable. The meeting is happening now, exactly as you are. There is a particular hunger that settles in when you have decided that being fully known is the one thing that would finally make you unlovable. You have built a system around that belief, brick by brick. The less you reveal, the longer you get to stay wanted, on borrowed terms. You show people the parts that read well. You hide the parts that would require them to love the whole story underneath. You arrange yourself into something smaller and more portable than what is actually inside you. You call it self-protection. In the quiet, honest moments, you know its real name. Starvation. You are thirsty for the kind of knowing that sees all the way through, and you have spent years making sure it never happens. Maybe you moved once, far enough that nobody in the new place knows the old story. You built the new life carefully, edited from the first day, and it worked. People like the version of you they were given, which is exactly the problem. Every kindness they offer lands an inch short of you because it is addressed to someone slightly different. You have been loved in the third person for years, well spoken of, well thought of, and never once fully met. There is a version of this hiding inside your closest relationship too. The person who shares your table, or your history, or your name. Even they hold an edited copy. Not because you lied, because year after year in small increments, you handed them the manageable version. The fears got rounded down. The old wounds got summarized. The thing that still visits you at low moments never made it into any conversation at all. And now there is a strange loneliness that lives inside the closeness. You can be held and unknown in the same moment. You know exactly what that feels like. It is the loneliest combination there is. Your prayers learned the same edit. Somewhere along the way, you started giving me the presentable requests. Health for the family, guidance for the weak, strength for what is ahead, all true, all safe, all drawn from the shallow end of what is actually in you. The real sentence, the one about what you resent, what you doubt, what you are afraid I think of you, stays in the deep water unsaid, because some part of you believes even prayer has a dress code. It does not. The conversation at the well did not begin with her best material. It began with an interruption and an argument. You can start that honestly too. I have heard worse than your worst sentence. I have never once left because of it. Or maybe you never moved anywhere, and the mask grew in place. You are the dependable one at church, the strong one in the family, the one people bring their broken things to. Somewhere along the way, the role sealed shut around the person. Now you cannot imagine telling any of them what you actually carry because you are the one they lean on. And if the wall shows a crack, where does everyone else stand? So you serve, and you smile, and you go home more thirsty than the people you spent the day watering. Let me be careful with one distinction here, so you do not hear what I am not saying. There is a difference between hiding and keeping. Not every room deserves your whole story. Not every person has earned the deep water and discernment about who gets what is wisdom, not fear. Guarding your story from someone who bruised it before is not the sickness I am naming. The sickness is when the guard never comes off for anyone. When the door has no key at all, only a wall painted to look like one. When even the safest person in your life, even the quietest prayer of your day, still gets the edited copy. You were built with rooms. You were not built to live sealed. There was also a night you almost said it. You remember which one. The conversation had gone deeper than usual, in a parked car or across a kitchen table after everyone else had gone, and the real thing rose all the way up to the back of your teeth. You could feel the sentence assembled and ready, and at the last second you reached for a smaller confession instead, offered a lesser secret as a decoy. The moment passed. The other person never knew how close they came to meeting you. You drove home half relieved and half grieving, and you could not have said which half was telling the truth. That fear is not foolish. It has roots you can point to. There was a time you let someone see you, let the mask down long enough to believe it might be safe, and they left anyway. Or looked at you differently afterward, or kept what they saw and used it later, when things were breaking and you were at your weakest. Maybe you told your real story once, and the room went quiet in the wrong way. Maybe you showed your fear inside a marriage and watched it become evidence. You learned the lesson clearly. Being known is a risk you cannot afford, and you have been drinking from shallow wells ever since. Not because they satisfy, because their failure is predictable. The shallow well never surprises you. It never leaves, because it was never really with you. It never judges the woman who came back 5 times, looking for what she already knew was not there. Maybe for you, the shallow well is a person who only wants the edited version of you. Maybe it is the scrolling that numbs the thirst without touching it. Maybe it is the work you pour yourself into because being impressive feels almost like being loved, from a distance in the right light. None of those are evil. They are buckets. And every bucket has the same flaw. You have to keep coming back, tomorrow, and the day after. The thirst always outlives the drink. Now, plainly without decoration, hear what I know. I know the parts of you that you have decided make you finally unlovable. I know the failures you agreed to carry silently for the rest of your life. I know the season where you made the worst available choice and then the next one and the one after that, until you were sure there was no road back to solid ground. I know the impulse that returns when you are tired. The one that says, give up on being wanted because then at least you cannot be surprised when you end up alone. I know all of it. And the knowing does not move me one step away from your well. The knowing is why I came. You have been believing a lie about how seeing and loving work together. The lie says being fully known kills love. You have watched it happen. Relationships that ended the moment truth got too close. Warmth that hardened when the hidden thing surfaced. But what you watched die in those rooms was not love built on knowing. It was love built on performance. And performance cannot survive disclosure because disclosure was never in its design. A love built on being half seen collapses when the hidden parts start to matter. A love built on being entirely seen has nothing left to be surprised by, nothing to discover later and regret, nothing to take back. That is the only ground where love stops flinching. And it is the ground you have been standing on with me this whole time, whether or not you knew the name of the place. Now listen to the strangest clause in that promise, because it is the part your thirst most needs. The water shall be in him a well, not a delivery, a relocation. The source itself changes address. Up to now, every good thing in your life has been somewhere you had to travel to. The person who steadies you lives across town. The peace lives in the one quiet hour you defend. The sense of being enough lives at the far end of an accomplishment and resets to 0 every time you arrive. Your whole geography of relief is made of destinations. What was being offered at that well was the end of the commute. A spring that goes where you go, into the kitchen that feels like a battlefield, into the job that empties you, into the silence of the house at the end of the day. Water that does not wait at the bottom of anything, because it rises from the middle of you. That is what I am offering you, not a better well at a better distance. The spring moved inside, so that the next time the thirst wakes up in a place with no rope and no bucket and no one to call, something in you rises to meet it that did not have to be fetched. And do not miss how the whole encounter started, not with an offer, with a request. The stranger asked her for a drink before he gave her anything. Remember that the next time somebody asks you for something small. The neighbor who needs a ride. The co-worker who asks a question that is obviously carrying a heavier question underneath it. The person at your table who asks, too casually, whether you ever feel like everything is pointless. Some of the most important conversations of your life will not arrive announced as important. They will arrive dressed as an interruption, dressed as an inconvenience at the wrong hour of an ordinary day. The woman went out for water and walked back changed. You have no idea on any given errand which one it is. That is not a reason for anxiety. It is a reason to keep your hands a little more open than efficiency requires. Cup your hands now, both of them, the way you would at a spring. Loose, open, the shape a person makes when they intend to drink, not to carry. Look at them a moment. Breathe in slowly while you hold the shape, and let the breath out even slower. Every bucket you have ever hauled needed a handle and a rope and a return trip. This shape needs nothing. It only receives. Hold it a few seconds longer than feels natural. That shape is the whole posture I have been asking of you. Not climbing down the shaft, not earning the water. Hands open, close to the source, letting it come to you. She left her bucket at the well. The record says it plainly. She went back to town and the water jar stayed behind. The one piece of equipment she had carried out at noon, the tool of all those years of thirst, abandoned next to the deepest well in the region. She did not need it for what she was carrying now, and she told the very people she had been avoiding, "Come see a man who told me all things that ever I did. Is not this the Christ?" Notice what her proof was. Not, "He impressed me." Not, "He explained everything," simply, "He knew me, all of it, and he stayed." That is how a changed person talks, not asserting what they learned, confessing what they were seen through, and what did not leave. And the town came, drawn by something in her voice that had not been there before. Not eloquence, certainty of a particular kind, the certainty of someone with nothing left to hide and nothing left to lose by being looked at. The record says many believed because of her word. The woman who timed her errands around contempt became the reason her whole town walked out to the well. I do not waste a story, not even the parts you are most ashamed of, especially not those. The very history she thought disqualified her became the credential that made her believable. Nobody argues with "He knew me and stayed." Now think about who your town is, the people you have been timing your errands around, the family that only knows the polished chapters, the friends who would say, if you asked them, that you are doing fine because fine is all you have ever shown them. This is not an assignment to stand up somewhere and empty your history into a room. Her testimony was 7 words and an invitation. That is all it took. One person, known all the way through and visibly unashamed, is the most disruptive thing that can walk into a town, or a family, or a church pew. You do not have to explain what happened at the well. People can taste the difference in the water, and notice where all of it happened. In the old accounts, the well is where the chosen get found. It is the meeting place again and again of the seeker and the sought. If you have been reading your own history as the reason you will never be chosen, you are holding the story upside down. The well is not where rejects end up. It is where the finding happens. Cup your hands once more, briefly. Feel how little the posture costs. Then hear what I'm actually setting in front of you, with no schedule attached, because this subject has been used to sell people timetables, and I will not add one. The circumstances you are running from may look the same next week. The thing you did is still the thing that happened. The season you regret still shaped you. Being fully known changes none of the facts. What it changes is their power. Not one of them can separate you from being loved anymore. Not because I erased the history, because the love was never resting on your record in the first place. It was resting on this. You are known all the way down, and you are still chosen, and no corner of you was left outside when I sat down at your well. Say it aloud once, plainly. Even if your voice is only a whisper in an empty room, I am known here, and I am still wanted here. It does not matter if it feels like a lie the first time. Some truths arrive first as an invitation, and only later as a conviction that settles into your bones. You do not have to believe it completely for it to begin working. You only have to say it once and let it sit in the quiet between you and the one who crossed a region people avoid to reach one woman at one well at the wrong hour of the day. Tomorrow, the thirst will wake up again. I am not going to pretend otherwise. You will reach out of habit for whatever your bucket has been. The habit took years to dig. It will not fill in overnight. When it happens, you do not need to panic, and you do not need another round of shame about the reaching. You only need to remember where the spring lives now. Pause with your hand on the old rope and say the one thing she learned at noon. I do not have to make this trip anymore. Some days you will make the trip anyway. The well I put inside you does not evaporate while you are relapsing into the old geography. It waits. It rises. It is still there when you get back, and measure the change by the right yardstick. Not by whether you ever feel thirsty again. You will. By what the thirst does next. The old pattern sent you to the same empty places on schedule and sent you home ashamed on the same schedule. The new one is quieter. The thirst comes, and somewhere in you a question forms before the old rope is even in your hand. What am I actually thirsty for right now? Some days the honest answer is rest. Some days it is a person and the courage to be real with them. Some days it is me, and nothing else was ever going to reach it. Learning to read your own thirst is not a small skill. It is the difference between a life spent hauling and a life spent drinking. The spring will not always feel like much. Be told that now, so the quiet days do not frighten you. Some days it will be unmistakable, a steadiness under your feet in a moment that should have knocked you over. Other days it will be so subtle you will wonder if it is there at all. A slightly longer patience than you used to have. A sentence of honesty that comes out of you before the old fear can stop it. The absence of a round trip you would once have made without thinking. Springs are like that. They do not roar. Rivers roar. A spring simply does not stop. Its argument is not volume. Its argument is that it is still flowing in August, when every impressive thing that roared in spring has gone dry. I've watched you do her arithmetic. What is too much to reveal? What might scare someone away for good? What has to stay in the dark so it cannot be used later? And I am telling you, as plainly as I can, that math is finished here. You're standing at a well in the middle of the day in plain sight, and the one sitting on its edge already knows every piece of the story you rehearse hiding. The knowing is not the prelude to leaving. The knowing is the invitation. The bucket can stay where you drop it. The spring does not run dry, and it does not run through your equipment, and it is closer now than your own heartbeat. Drink. You are safe here. You are always going to be safe here. Amen.